Born a Muslim. Some truths about Islam in India. And I think, Ghazala, when I read this book, I felt anxious, I felt deeply shameful, and I felt that I should apologize to you for living in a secular, democratic republic like India, and for you to have to go through so much trauma just because of your religion, the religion that you are identified with. So this book, I think, is a mixture of sorts. It has got the history of Islam, not just in the world, but also from its entry into India. It's got statistics. Statistics about the riots that have happened, statistics about the people that have been injured and killed in the name of religion, rather. And it's also extremely personal in narrative, where she's recounted her personal experiences of having lived in India, identified as a Muslim. And I should say, not just born a Muslim, but born a Muslim woman. Would you care to talk about it, Ghazala, beginning from your personal experiences?
Thank you so much, Priya, for this wonderful, wonderful introduction. It's embarrassing also a little bit. I don't think I deserve the kind of praise you are giving to me. And thank you, Kerala Literature Festival, for inviting me. And my biggest thank or heartfelt gratitude to this audience. So many of them and so many of you still here, end of the day, not exhausted, and end of the festival, but still showing the enthusiasm and interest in a subject like this. So thank you to all of you. I'll start from the beginning of how the book came about, because that's what you asked me. This book was a culmination of my writing primarily on terrorism. I had not conceptualized this book as a treatise on the lived experiences of Muslims in India. I thought of this more as a response to mainly the Western propaganda against jihad and how all terrorists are Muslims. But once I started work on it, and I realized that there were so many aspects to stereotyping people. And stereotypes sometimes do have some basis in truth, which is why they become so believable. But mostly, a stereotype has to have so much of resonance with a large majority of people that it becomes a truth. So I thought maybe there is a need to go deeper in this, why we have so much of prejudice against one another, why there was so much of prejudice, what was the root for this? Is it really a historical fact that Muslims have done such horrendous things in India, that millions were killed and thousands of temples were burnt or razed to ground? Was Islam forced the religion on the people here? Was it entirely by the power of sword? So all of this then led me to do a little more research, a lot of engagement with people, a lot of travel and interviews.
And I think there was a very personal experience with mob violence, right? That spurred you on to write about this.
Actually, that was the, I won't say that that mob violence in any case affected me or my approach to life subsequently. It was a very frightening moment. It was, this whole Babri Masjid movement was going on, and worse things were happening to people. We were lucky we escaped alive and with our house more or less intact. But the fear was immobilizing, and I think it is for everybody who is forced to witness or forced to go through something which is beyond your control. And it is more worrying, or it is more traumatizing for those who think they are in control. And when they suddenly relinquish control, when they feel that they are no longer in control, it is more immobilizing then. So that when I mentioned in the book, I had kind of forgotten about this, because in my family we always thought that we should not talk about this incident anymore, and we should collectively try and put it, in some black box somewhere in the deep recesses of our memories. That is what I had also done. It was only when I was writing this book and I was doing this, chronicling of communal violence in India since 47, that I thought that maybe I should dig this out and write about this as well, because it gives immediacy to my argument, because I have personally experienced something.
As I was going through your book, the one thing that kept repeating itself in my mind was that whether it is a Hindu or a Muslim, the person under threat is always a liberal, somebody who is very moderate in their opinions. What do you think about that?
Person at the?
Who's liberal?
No, person who? Which person?
Either a Hindu or a Muslim. What
Okay.
is it? What is being threatened? What is an attack? Is
Okay.
somebody who is a liberal, somebody who is moderate.
Actually, I think there is a dynamic in a mob which works, where a mob gives you anonymity, anonymity of action, and maybe a lot of other things you can vent out. But that goes only some distance. The biggest motivator of any mob is the dehumanizing in his mind that happens about the victim. You actually think that maybe this victim is not feeling the pain that I'm inflicting, or this victim is probably like an ant. You justify it in so many ways in your mind, because if you were to regard the victim, and it's not just in a situation of communal violence, I'm talking of events like gang rape or events like a lynching, which has been happening in the last few years. When you are doing something, you're inflicting pain, you somehow feel that the person is not feeling that pain because that person is not equal to you. A person who's equal to you would feel the pain the way you would feel, but the person, the victim who's in front of you, is somehow not your equal. So this process of dehumanization, I think this has been a trigger for a large number of mass violence that we've seen, not just in India but worldwide. That you dehumanize a community, a people to such an extent that you actually start thinking of them like vermin. That it's okay to inflict this kind of pain. It's okay to inflict this kind of humiliation on them.
I think one thing that your book has done and the research that has gone into it has done is to dismantle this idea of the Western discourse of a pan-cultural Muslim identity. You know, if you take the case of the hijab, for example, in a place like Karnataka, you have girls who are forced to move away from the public domain because they want to wear the hijab. And on the other hand, you have people in Iran protesting against this. So one thing is that there are deep fissures within the community. And there is nothing called a pan-cultural identity for Islam anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. I think like most religions in the world, I'm not talking of religions which are very small in size in terms of population which adheres to that faith, but most large religions are not monolith, they're not uniform. And all of them, the very fact that they spread to so many places is because they were geographically rooted. So a Muslim in Kerala is very different from a Muslim in Kashmir, or a Muslim in Bengal is very different from Muslims in Gujarat, and or everyone in between, from UP to Madhya Pradesh to Andhra. So there is no uniform Muslim identity. A uniform Muslim identity is being imposed upon a large number of Muslims by the Muslims themselves, especially who think that they know Islam better than others, who think that they understand religion more than everybody else, so they have kind of become the religious monitors. So they are trying to impose a monolith identity. But I would like to talk a little bit more on hijab. This is a very important subject for me personally. Being a woman, and I have seen that how hijab has been used since the Islamic laws were written to disempower and invisibilize women. I've been here for the last, I came last night, so I spent some time in the morning going around the city, and I saw a large number of women wearing hijab, and many of them wearing full face covering hijab. And it just occurred to me that basically what a full face covering hijab does to you, it invisibilizes you. It removes you from the society. You are then basically a mobile tent. You're moving around without your person moving around. You are just hiding. Why is it necessary for women to hide? When the Islam itself, you know, there's a very famous saying among Muslims, I have quoted that in this, that Islam spread through the wealth of Khadija and through the sword of Ali. Now, there would have been no religion of Islam if there was no woman. The first convert to the religion was a woman, and the person who ensured that Muslims were not persecuted, that they had the right to profess their religion and propagate their religion, was a woman. And she was one of the most successful business person in Arabia. She had the largest caravans plying in and out of Mecca. So when the religion itself came from a woman who was empowered, who could decide who she wanted to marry, who chose to marry again, who ensured that her marriage remained monogamous in a society where men had as many women as wives and as chattel and mistresses and anything. When the religion itself came from this important feminist source, why do we now think that it is religious dictum for women to invisibilize themselves? Why do we accept when men tell us that you have to cover up if you have to go out of your houses? And I think this is what women in Iran are fighting against. They are not fighting against the religion. They are fighting against the clergy, which tells them that unless you are dressed in a particular manner, you cannot step out. So hats off to them and more power to them.
Continue on the theme, you have written about Shaheen Bagh, and I quote from your book, the Shaheen Bagh, you said, is the metaphor, the turning point in Indian history. The women who came out into the public domain and spoke against a lot of things, including the triple talaq. And I felt that, you know, all religions carry out their most intense performances on the bodies of women. So how important is Shaheen Bagh in that context?
Shaheen Bagh, in hindsight, I think it was a very momentous time in the history of India. Since independence, we had never seen women who were considered disempowered, women who were considered having no agency, semi-literate, some of them illiterate, coming out of their homes spontaneously for a cause which was not religion. If you see, every time Muslims converge on the roads, it is for religion. It's either for or against triple talaq or some Sharia law or offense against some book or offense against insult to the Prophet. They come out and they protest. They get killed also in the process sometimes. But this was the first time they came out, and women came out and men followed because they were fighting for something which was not religious, which did not only involve them and their personal lives, which involved actually a larger cause. So it was a huge moment of reckoning, not only for the community as a whole, the Muslim community, not just women, but men too. But it was a moment of reckoning for all sane Indians who think that a document which we call the Constitution, which nobody reads, is sacrosanct as a religious text. Because if you abandon then this document, then actually you throw the country to the wolves.
I think, you know, like you said, women were the worst sufferers. And another class too suffered, the poor Muslims. And you have said that, you know, right after the riots happened and the Babri issue happened, poor Muslims in the north were forced to use Hindu names to find employment. Now, sitting here in Kerala, we might find this quite surprising because we just read statistics. We do not get really, truly personal information, personal narratives. And this is truly troubling. To live in a country that promises you secularism and democracy and to have such a fractured identity just to find employment.
Actually, I also discovered this in the course of writing the book. I have met so many people, and I never thought that a person who's coming to work, a carpenter or a plumber, he may not be Muslim, or he may be Muslim. I never considered that. I always took the name that was given to me at face value. It was only that I became a little more sensitive to this because I was working on the book, so I had started asking questions of people, and somehow I stumbled upon this very sad reality. I'll give you a very recent example. There is a guard, you have guard agencies which supply you guards for your offices and all that, security agencies. So there's a guard who comes to my office from one of the security agencies. I don't know how he found out that I'm a Muslim, but now in the last few months I have noticed that he always says Salaam Alaikum to me. And I checked with my office person, who looks after the administration, that is the guard Muslim. So she told me, no, he's not a Muslim. This lady, she told me he's not a Muslim. I said, no, because he says salam to me. So she said, no, he says ram ram to me. But why is he saying salam to me? Because I think he thinks he can say this and get away with it. But with others, he's not confident that his mode of greeting would be accepted the way he's saying it. So this is a very, very unfortunate truth about India today. And I don't know how we can fight it given the kind of polarization we are seeing in our society.
Exactly, and that brings me to the next question. You have written about 2 factors that has changed the way a Muslim sees herself in India, Modi and the social media. So please elaborate on that.
This is really troubling now that social media has given a very wrong kind of agency to completely anonymous people who think they can do anything on social media and get away with it. And that is the reason a lot of people who would earlier speak or who would vocalize their identities or their opinions are reticent, because you don't know when the social, which is a virtual world, will translate into the physical world. The kind of terror which some people have experienced in the physical world when their phone numbers are revealed publicly, when their home addresses or the names of their family members are revealed in public spaces, it is troubling. And that is the reason that most people now in India, the Muslims especially, who want or seek larger acceptance, they try and merge or go with the flow. They do not want to assert their religion on their sleeves to a very large extent, except in areas or communities where they feel secure. Like in Kerala, for instance, where they draw comfort not only probably from the numbers they have, but also the society as per se, where religious stereotyping or religious segregation doesn't happen the way it is happening in the north.
Well, this is a question about labeling, and especially the very problematic label of progressive. Like you said, you often hear the word progressive Muslim, but you hardly ever hear a progressive Hindu or a progressive Christian or a progressive Sikh. Isn't that rather problematic? Because, just one religion is supposed to be progressive, and all the other religions have somehow reached enlightenment.
I really don't know the answer to this. Even I was mystified that why this word is used only for Muslims and not for anybody else. What I can only hazard a guess here is that when a lot of Muslims joined the mainstream politics, they tried to create a pan-India identity or a pan-regional identity over and above their religion. They did not want to be identified with their own religion because they were seeking acceptance from people of other religions, which is not the case with, let's say, a Hindu politician. Because even if all Hindus support a Hindu politician, that politician will win the elections. But it's not so in the case of a Muslim politician. So I think they started this notion that we are progressive Muslim, so that people who are not Muslims can also support them in elections. They do not look at them in a parochial manner. They do not consider that, oh, this person will only talk about the Muslim rights or Muslim benefits to Muslims. So I think probably that is how this phrase emerged, and it was somehow then used to judge the community. So anybody who was conservative or who was a deeply religious person was automatically considered as less progressive. So I think probably that is how the word originated.
And there's another dimension to it. You're supposed to declare your nationalist sentiments very often, aren't you? Whether you're watching a cricket match or anything else, your nationalist sentiments have to be declared from time to time. But this is not expected of many other religious communities.
See, this is where stereotyping comes. Even before independence, and here I go back to the organization which I hold responsible for all problems that we have in India today, and that is the RSS. The RSS, when they started their narrative they started the narrative of uniting all Hindus for a cause. Now, a cause, when you are trying to mobilize people, they have to be mobilized against something. You have to show them an enemy, the other. So to create the other, they decided that, and Savarkar has actually written this in his book very clearly, that why Muslims were chosen as the other as opposed to the British. I mean, they could have fought the British also and used them as the other to mobilize the Hindu community. But British were very powerful at that point. They could not fight the British. And also, they felt that this 1,000-year of history of Muslim rule in parts of India, not entire country at any point, but in various parts of India, it was felt that there is a lot of material here which can be mined for spreading stories, for exaggerations. Of course, all kings are cruel. Of course, no king is a democrat. They don't care about human rights. It's not just the Muslim king. So clearly a lot of human right violations happened, a lot of killings would have happened, a lot of injustice would have happened. But there was a lot of potential to mine this and to create a narrative that these are all outsiders. So the first narrative was that they are, in Hindi they say, ghar ke bahar wale. They are outsiders in the homeland. So when you have outsiders in the homeland, you have to constantly prove that, no, I'm as much Indian as you are. So that is how this narrative built. And it has continued. People still regard Muslims as outsiders.
And I think you have also mentioned that, in the north, the partition memories are very strong, which is not so much the case in the south.
South, yes. But you see, even in partition, it was not a one-way traffic. When partition happened, it was not just the Muslim League which was demanding partition. The RSS, the Hindu Mahasabha, even the Congress, to a very large extent, also wanted the partition because the feeling was that the power should remain concentrated in certain hands. And this is borne by the history. I mean, if you read the history from 1925 onwards, so the discussion, the shape of the partition, how it will happen, was taking place as early as 1920s and being discussed not by the Muslims but by the Hindus. A person like Lala Lajpat Rai wrote a series of articles in the Tribune newspaper of Punjab that how he envisages partition to happen, what provinces should be partitioned, and which population should be divided in which manner this division should take place. And he was talking of a clear partition. He was not talking about two states under one country, I mean two autonomous states under the Union of India, what the Muslim League proposal originally was. So this has been going on for a long time. It is not that the Muslims suddenly woke up one day and said, we want a separate country. This process was on, and there were a lot of people engaged in this process.
Well, there is majoritarian politics on one side, and on the other you have talked about how Islam is being misinterpreted by people who practice Islam as well. So you have two very conflicting powers struggling against each other, and how do we go forward? Is there a way in which the moderate, liberal, secular Indian can survive?
You know, in a democracy, the power lies with the people. I think if people start thinking, questioning everything which is fed to them by opportunist politicians, we can pull ourselves back from the abyss that is staring at us in the face. I feel very, very worried and very concerned the way our politics, especially in the North India and the West India, is going on. It's deeply unnerving at times. The people who you never would regard as conservative or parochial or communal have been saying things like, so what's wrong if India is a Hindu Rashtra? So these things are troubling, but again, it's a democracy. The power to change belongs to the people. And if people start to exercise that power in a productive or a progressive manner, I think we will be able to create an India that was envisaged in 1947.
And what about the Indian Muslim? Where do you see this entire discourse going? Based on the extensive research that you have done about the past, what do you think will be the future?
I think Indian Muslims need to become a little more assertive about their religious beliefs, and not the beliefs handed down to them by the ulama or their religious, select group of religious people. They should try and understand what the spirit of Islam was, what it tried to do in the society, what kind of reforms it tried to bring into the society, and then judge for themselves, are they actually on the path to reformation or are they on the path back in time? So unless they do this, they'll remain victims of this two-pronged attack by the ulamas, which are your own people supposedly, but who are determined to hold you down. And in any case, you are getting pushed down by outside forces too. The communal forces, the political forces, whose interest is served in keeping you impoverished, keeping you disempowered, keeping you poor.
Yeah, that is why I asked you about the future of the Indian Muslim, because you said that more and more people are setting up their own businesses. They're not seeking employment in one sense. The statistics are dropping. You don't find laborers or people on daily wages. Rather, they set up their own business. In one way, that is good, isn't it?
Yes, but then the troubling part is they are withdrawing themselves from the mainstream even more. They are ceding more and more space in the mainstream. Now, if you are not in the mainstream, if you are not engaging with the mainstream, you become more and more the other. It is even more easy for others to stereotype you, to spread rumors about you, and believe those rumors, because they don't know what a Muslim looks like, because there is no Muslim in the mainstream. So if you are engaging with the rest of the society, at least you can, whenever possible, tell them that what you believe is incorrect. If you are there in the mainstream universities, mainstream organizations working, or live in housing societies with multicultural housing societies, people of all religions, you can dispel the thinking or the stereotype that, oh, but you don't look like a Muslim. Because actually, what does a Muslim look like? A Muslim looks like anybody else.
That's a major point, because you about living in mainstream housing colonies, because you said that when riots happen, the tendency is to go back into the safe spaces, creating ghettos of sorts.
Yes, this is a huge failure of the state, that it allows ghettos to come up. It allows this sort of a fear psychosis to grow, that people feel insecure in areas where they are not in the majority. It's a terrible thing. No, I don't think there's any democracy in the world where you will find that people move to a particular area out of fear. I'm sure there are community-specific housing in all parts of the world. I've been to a few countries, and I know that even, let's say in London, there is a locality where Indians live, and majority of Indians prefer living there. But it is not out of fear, it is out of comfort. They want to stay there because
Same type of food.
Same type of food, same type of people, language. They feel that they are in a comfort zone. But when a Muslim moves out of a mainstream, he or she is doing so because of fear. And the comfort zone that they create, it's only a mental comfort zone. It's not a physical comfort zone. They live in terrible conditions. I mean, if you go to any North Indian Muslim populated area, you'll be shocked to see the abject conditions in which they live. And even qualified, well-to-do people, they prefer living there purely out of security or insecurity outside that area. So I think it's a matter of shame for us as a nation.
This is about the book, rather. How difficult was the research? Because you said you were too visible at some time, at certain points of time, and you wanted to be invisible to when you were gathering statistics, and you have done extensive and intensive research in that manner, I must say, because you have gone into riot-stricken areas, collected information, and you've often noticed that the state has failed many a time to stop the riots when it could have ended with the first death, or even before that.
Absolutely. I think as far as riots or violence is concerned, we have accepted that there is a few hour, there is a concept of a window of a few hours where the state and the police is told that, okay, let the rioters run amok for a few hours, and then you come into action, and then you stop the rioters. And this has been witnessed in violence after violence, that the police allows the perpetrators to have their way for a few hours. And in some cases, they've actually gone and told the people, 2 ghante ka time hai, you have 2 hours, and then we'll come. So do whatever you want to do. So, I have actually quoted a source from one of the books which were written after the Gujarat violence, that the police was going around saying this. So anyway, the problem with I have forgotten the question.
Well, my question was how difficult was the research?
Yes, the most difficult part about the research was actually finding a learned Muslim person who was not extremely conservative and dogmatic. Because I had so many questions about the religion, and I was trying to question a lot of things which were written, or which are supposedly written in the Quran. So I wanted somebody who could engage in a conversation with me and not tell me that you can't talk like this and you're committing blasphemy. So I think that was the most difficult part of my research. As far as collecting information and statistics was concerned, because I am a professional journalist, I have been moving around, I have been traveling to various parts of the country. So that was not such a difficult thing. Processing that information was difficult. Coming back and just going over my notes and collecting my thoughts to write it down, that was difficult, because I often felt really traumatized and despondent that what kind of a country are we living in, how can we behave like this. And
it is interspersed with personal narrative. That too must have been difficult, because you were talking about your extended family as well.
And it surprised me so much that I thought I come from a reasonably privileged background. I have gone to reasonably good school, had a recent education, career and everything. If my kind of a family could also experience these things, and not just once, a few times, what does an ordinary average person who doesn't have the privilege either of money or connections with the bureaucracy, because the connections with bureaucracy is very important in a country like India. So if you have no connections and if you have no money to create connections, life is very difficult.
So before we go to the audience for their questions, I would just like to mention something that you have written in your very poignant introduction to the book, and that is the idea of the threshold. And I think at this point of time, not just the women, not just the people, the precariats, we are all on the threshold, right? Inside and outside, betwixt and between.
Actually, when I was thinking about the concept of threshold, I was reminded of the Lakshman Rekha. So we have created these artificial boundaries for people who we wish to typecast or relegate into certain spaces. So for women, we have created a threshold that they should not step outside this particular line. We've done the same for people of certain class, where money really matters a lot. Then people of certain caste, we have done the same. And of course, for religion. So I think as a society, all of us, we are operating within a lot of lines. And hopefully, with our tolerance and our understanding and empathy, we will be able to soften these lines. Instead of they becoming hardened borders, maybe they can just be a relic of the past where we know that, okay, so we have crossed this and now we are in a space where all of us can engage with one another as one people, irrespective of caste, community, gender, and everything.
Well, now it's over to the audience. Your questions are welcome.
Hello, ma'am. Sorry for my voice. Thank you so much for coming. So in the book, I remember you've written that during the partition, the ones who were able to move to Pakistan were the wealthy Muslims who could afford completely shifting their base to another country. And the ones who stayed back were the ones who some stayed back by choice, but some had to because they couldn't afford. And that's how they got defined by occupation. Their occupation started getting defined by their religion. And I would want to ask that, is that still the case? Like, how are Indian Muslims still defined by their religion in terms of occupation?
Occupation has been a big factor of our in the Indian caste hierarchy. The caste has been a big factor in establishing who does what work. So it was the case with Muslims. Though Muslims claim that they are a casteless society, they also have their caste system. They don't have so much of violence within the caste, so there's not fratricidal violence among the Muslims. But there is a hierarchy which is determined by the kind of work you do. Now, when the partition happened, the landed class, which was rich, the landlords, their biggest worry was that they will be overwhelmed by the Hindu people, the Hindu majority. So to safeguard their turf, their power, their influence, they moved to Pakistan. But the people who were working on those lands, the tillers, the artisans, the craftspeople, they could not understand the grand politics behind partition. For most people, I am sure it is for people in Calicut also, your immediate identity is your neighborhood, and then your city, your region. The national identity comes much later. So for a lot of people, the immediate identity was their village. They could not understand if the village remains where it is, why they need to go somewhere else. So they stayed where the village was. It is true even today. If you take the case of Gujarat, for instance, I'm using this as an example only. In Gujarat, there are very clear border lines in cities where the Muslims live and where the Hindus live. And colloquially, people say Pakistan and Hindustan. The Muslim areas are called Pakistan. The Muslim areas are very bad. They have no facilities. A lot of rich Gujarati Muslims, the diaspora, they have sent money back home to develop these areas. But they are living they are living on the margins, all right, but they have disconnected themselves from the society completely. They take care of their own education, they take care of their own employment and everything. So as a stakeholders, they have no stakes in the Indian society, which is a very, I would say, even a dangerous thing. But they still continue to live there. I often wonder, why do they want to live there? Why don't they go to some other place? Before the Gujarat elections now, the rapists of Bilkis Bano were released, and they came back to the same area where that lady was living, used to live. Any decent society would be abhorred by this. But not only are we not abhorred by this, the people there said, no, it's okay that they are released. They are Brahmins and they should not be punished in this manner. And I asked myself, but why do Muslims continue to go through this sort of an ignominy and live there? Why don't they leave? Maybe go to Bombay, go to some other part of the country, come to Kerala or go to Tamil Nadu where they are safer. But they do not want to go anywhere because they are tied to their geography and they're tied to their ancestral profession, because that's the only thing they know. They feel completely at a loss if they are uprooted from there and put somewhere else. So I think it is as true today of that you're tied to your geography and you're tied to your craft, what you have learned through generations, as it was true then.
Okay, so my question is, like, at the beginning of the session, we have conceptualized the Kozhikodan hijab wearing woman or the Malabarian hijab wearing woman. To give a brief background, those are one of the educated women in Kerala or even in India. Like, there are students or girls who are even studying in certain universities, and I think even above 90% of them are even doing graduation, and even most of them are even financially independent also, doing work. And also, what led you to conceptualize that as they fell prey for the process of invisibilization and not their choice?
Thank you for this question. There are so many women in this audience, but not a single woman asked this question. A man asked this question. Now, why I say this? Because when the Udupi protests were going on, you saw a large number of men coming out in support of women. You did not see a large number of women coming out in support of women. There were more men. More men were worried that women should not be allowed to go out without wearing a hijab. Now you see, women, there is a thing called choice and there is a thing called conditioning. When from your childhood you are told to wear a hijab, or your mother dresses you up in a hijab when you are going out, then it's a habit. And if you don't change your habit, it becomes a compulsion because you have to do it. Then you're used to it. If you don't wear a hijab, you feel awkward. You feel everybody is looking at you because you're not used to anybody looking at you. So it is not a question of choice. Women may say, we are doing it out of choice. But have you ever tried to understand what was the root for this choice? When they were 5-year or 6-year-old, did they choose to wear it? Or they got used to wearing it and they're wearing it? Which is why a lot of women said that we feel naked if we don't wear a hijab and go out. Why do they feel naked when they're fully covered? It is because they have been used to wearing it. It is such an integral part of their identity that without it, they cannot see themselves as individuals. So that is why I say that it is not a question of empowerment, or it is not a question of education. It is a question of what you are told to do in the name of religion?
Madam, my question is almost the same. If she is wearing the hijab on her own choice, do you have the right to force them not to do it? Do you have the right to make it unlawful? That is my first question. Second question is, looking at my small beard, will you call me a terrorist? Or if somebody calls me a terrorist looking at my small beard, will you agree with that? I'm talking of the symbols. I don't know, I didn't read your book. I don't know what you say about this in your book. Okay? Thank you.
I'll answer your second question first. Even if you had a very long beard and even if you were wearing a skull cap, I would not call you a terrorist. Now that we are talking about terrorism, let me go a step further. I am convinced there is no such thing as Islamic terrorism. And there is no threat of Islamic terrorism either to India or to any part of the world. What we have seen in the name of terrorist violence is basically violence out of political compulsions, political causes. Wherever you have an unresolved political problem, wherever the aspirations of people have not been met politically, they resort to violence. Now, because the powers who can resolve the political problems do not want to resolve them, they dehumanize the protesters as terrorists, because then there is no reason, the political problem automatically vanishes, because then the problem is of terrorism, not politics. So I do not believe in terrorism in the name of religion, which unfortunately we have internalized, whether it is Islamic or Hindu or Sikh or Christian. So that is the second part. The first part is, I have no problems in women wearing a hijab or not wearing a hijab. As long as it's a matter of choice, they should be able to wear whatever they want to wear, wherever they want to wear. It is not just a Muslim woman, any woman, she should be able to decide what is best for her, what looks good on her, what doesn't look good on her. She can decide whether she wants to attract another person's attention or she wants to deflect attention from her. It is her choice. My problem is when the choice is confused with a lot of other things. I have never objected to anybody, and I still do not object to anybody wearing a hijab, but and I have made it very clear in the book, a large number of Muslim women, they wear hijab because they think Islam tells them to wear hijab. A large number of Muslim women cover their faces. They wear gloves on their hands so that even the fingernails do not show, because they think their religion tells them to do that. My only request or appeal to them is, read your religion, read the Quran and see for yourself, it doesn't ask you to do this.
I think we have completed the time allotted to us. One more question. Okay, fine.
So my question is in response to your previous answer. About conditioning, aren't we all conditioned in some way or the other? Sometimes it's the market, sometimes it's the state, sometimes it's the society, sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's family. So how can we say that a particular type of conditioning is oppressive, or it's a lack of choice? We choose to wear a sari or a salwar. Is it out of our pure idea of I didn't find this salwar as a result of my pure idea. It was, it was given to me somehow. So, like that, everything is given to us in some way or the other, right? So the conditioning, it's there in multiple ways. So how come only one type of conditioning is, branded as, lack of choice, and everything else is, free choice? So how come,
Okay, I will give an example from my life to see if I can answer your question. I went to a convent school, and as those who have been to a convent school would know, their uniform is very stringent. So my uniform, diagram of my uniform was there, the picture was there in my diary, which the school issues to all students. So it was very clear what my uniform was. My skirt was meant to be 2 inches above my knees. But my mother decided that this was un-Islamic, and my skirt should not be less than 5 inches below my knees. So my skirt used to basically hover around my ankles. Now, I was always pulled out in the assembly. The nuns would shout at me, punish me for my uniform, which was not conforming with the laid down rules. I spoke with my mother several times. My mother said, no, we cannot do this. You cannot go to school wearing a skirt which is 2 inches above your knees. I realized that between my mother and the nuns, I will be collateral damage. And so I had to take the matter in my own hands. So when I used to go to the school, the moment I got off from my car, as I mentioned, I came from a privileged background. I mean, I used to go to my school in a car. So when I got down from the car, I used to pull up my skirt, roll up the belt like this, so that it was 2 inches above my knees, and put my belt over it. So my waist used to become something like 40 inches or whatever. So I used to look funny, but anyway, that is how I used to go to the school. When I came out of the school at the end of the day, I used to pull it down, and when I reached home, my skirt would be right till my ankles. This is how I did my school. Now, whether it is conditioning or choice, I had set my priorities. My priorities were that I have to, I am in a good school, I am getting good education, I want to learn English language, I want to get into writing. I was obsessive about writing. I always wanted to be a writer. So I realized that I have to finish my schooling in this school so that then I can go to a good college, and I want to become a writer. I'm not getting involved in this religious and uniform battle at home and in school. So here I was neither conditioned in a particular manner, nor I spent my time wasting thinking whether I am forced to do this, whether my religion tells me this, whether it is my choice or not, whether I'm being taken, my agency is being taken away from me. I realized that these are all matters of complete waste of time. I must focus on my priority, do what I wanted to do in life, and move on. There'll be plenty of time later in life to dwell on these issues and think whether I was oppressed at home, whether the nuns were oppressing me by forcing me to pull up my skirt, whether my mother was oppressing me. It was immaterial. If this concept is so heavily weighing on your mind that you want to leave your education, statistics have just come out that since the Udupi incident, a large number of Muslim girls, they have dropped out of PU colleges. Some of them have dropped out of education entirely, and some are going to private colleges, which obviously was not their first choice. What is this? Is this oppression or is this choice? If you could not go to college because of certain factors, then obviously you are allowing yourself to be dictated by a variety of factors which you could have easily avoided. That is my only humble submission.
Are there any more questions, or shall we wind up? So thank you very much, Ghazala, for that wonderful interaction. And I hope that all of us take the time off to read this book instead of believing in WhatsApp university forwards and demonizing the other and living in a world of, what do I say, phantasmagoria created by the virtual world. I think we should delve into this book because it is extensively well researched and she talks with statistics. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.